Speakers from the European Investment Bank, Fannie Mae, GNE Finance, Epta Prime, Clean Energy Works, and the Connecticut Green Bank today. I am Mariangela Fabri. I'm the head of research at the Buildings Performance Institute of Europe, BPIE, and I will be your host and the moderator for this webinar today. While we wait for everyone to log in, we will show you a first polling question before then moving on to the housekeeping rules, so that we make sure that everyone will listen to that. You should be able to see the polling questions. I don't though, so I'm not sure. Okay, so just we would like to know first of all, what sector are you from, just to get a sense of who is the audience today, since we spread across 2 continents. So please let us know whether you're part of an NGO, government, private sector, industry, or from another sector. You can write it in the chat box. We can see from the result, they're still getting in, that most of the participants today, 53%, belong to the NGO sector, about 28% in the private sector, 21% from government, 11%, between 10 and 11, it keeps changing in industry, and only 5% is from a different sector. But I cannot see which sector that is. So before we get started, it's 16:03 in the afternoon here in Brussels. I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items, so you know how to participate in the events today and how to use the Webex system. You should be able to see a screenshot of what you're seeing on your screen to the left of the Webex viewer, through which you can see the presentation. To the right-hand side is the Webex control panel, where you can use the chat box and ask questions. We've taken the screenshot of an example of the attendees interface. Please write in the chat if you're not able to see it. And you should see something that looks like this on your desktop, and your listening is by default in using your computer speaker system. You will have the opportunity to submit text question by typing your question to the Q&A panel on the right-hand side of your screen. And you will be able to send questions at any time during the presentation. We will collect them and address them during the Q&A session at the end of each agenda item. Throughout the webinar, you will be able to answer polling questions that will be displayed on the right-hand side of your screen. The slides will be sent to all the participants along with the recording directly into your inbox the day after the webinar, so that would be tomorrow. Those of you who have specifically requested to be added to a participant list will receive them. And please note that only those of you who requested to be part of the participant list will be named, and only your name, title, organization will be shared with the other participants. No more. Any other additional information will not be shared with the other participants. I think we can now start with the agenda for today. We have quite a rich agenda with many speakers from both the US and Europe. We will start with a session highlighting and profiling the big picture. We have Isidoro Tapia from the European Investment Bank, he's Senior Economist on Energy Efficiency, and Karyn, Sper, who is Director at the Multifamily Green and Healthy Housing Financing at Fannie Mae. They will give their keynote speech one after the other, and we will take questions afterwards. So the presentations will be followed by a Q&A. We'll then move to a second session titled Making Energy Efficiency Happen, the process of financing energy efficiency projects in multifamily and single-family homes. And here we have 4 speakers, 2 speakers from Europe and 2 speakers from the US. So we have Michele Russo, the founder and chairman of Epta Prime, who will present us the Super Bono 100% scheme, followed by Davide Canarotti, Chief Executive Officer and founder of GNE Finance, who will present financing eco-sustainable home renovation. Then we will move to the US with Holmes Hummel, who is Executive Director of Clean Energy Works, and will present inclusive solutions for capitalizing building energy upgrades. And our last speaker will be Peter Ludwig, Senior Manager of the Market Engagement at the Connecticut Green Bank, who will present and will talk about accelerating clean energy adoption with the Connecticut Green Bank. We will have the 4 presentation in a row, and we will then have a Q&A together. So do not hesitate to write comments and questions in the Q&A chat. And we will then close the event at 6 p.m. in Europe, I think would be around 12 in the East Coast of the US. I think we can now move to the first presentation. Isidoro is Senior Economist of Energy Efficiency at the European Investment Bank. The floor is yours, and Margot will change the slides. You just need to let her know when. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And on behalf of the EIB of the European Investment Bank, thank you very much for the invitation to participate today. So I will present very briefly the EIB activities with a particular focus on energy efficiency and residential buildings. And in particular, I will present a couple of examples of what we have been doing over the last few years. Next slide, please. So the EIB group is composed by the European Investment Bank and the European Investment Fund, the EIB and the EIF. The EIB provides finance for investment projects, basically, and the EIF, in a nutshell, provides risk financing for SMEs. Next slide. The EIB is the EU bank, so it's the financing partner of the EU institutions since it was founded in 1958. It's the largest multilateral financial institution. It is also the largest provider of climate action financing. Their shareholders are the 28 EU member states. We have around 50 branches worldwide and 3,400 employees. Next slide, please. Our 4 main priorities are in this slide are presented here: innovation, environment, infrastructure, and SMEs. As you can see, the numbers are quite big. These figures correspond to 2020. We dedicated around 16.8 billion to environmental activities. And in addition to this, we dedicated 14.4 to innovation and 15 to infrastructure activities. Next slide, please. Let me start by presenting the EU context in the field of climate change activities. As you probably know, the EU has adopted the target to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 55% by 2030. The previous target was around 40%, and in December 2020 it was agreed to increase this target to 55%. The EU has also adopted the target to become climate neutral by 2050. That means to have net zero emissions of the overall EU economy. There are different instruments or programs now in place to achieve these targets. The most important ones are the EU Green Deal, the recovery package in the context of the response to the COVID-19 crisis, and the renovation wave of particular relevance today because it has the focus of increasing the rate of building renovations across EU. Next slide, please. Investment in buildings in all decarbonization scenarios, they have to increase in order to achieve the targets. I'm using here the figures of the World Energy Outlook of the International Energy Agency, which was just published a few days ago. You can see here how worldwide investments in buildings are required to multiply by a factor of 4 to quadruple by 2030 in order to be in the 1.5 degree scenario. And you can see how the unrealized potential is largest for building retrofits. So it is estimated that only 20% of the economically viable retrofits has already been implemented or announced. But there are also many opportunities in the rollout of heat pumps, in the increase of renewable sources for heating, in lighting system, of course, and in the increase of appliance efficiency, as you can see here in this graph. Next slide, please. At the European Investment Bank, we have incorporated the EU context, EU policy, of course, which the EIB is a policy-oriented bank. In 2019, the EIB adopted its new energy lending policy with a very ambitious target to increase the percentage of climate action financing to 50% by 2025 and to mobilize 1 trillion of investment in the recent decade to climate action related activities. In 2020, last year, the bank also adopted the Climate Bank roadmap aligning all its activities to the Paris Agreement, basically to the 1.5 degree scenario. That means that we are not only concerned by the amount, the percentage that we are dedicating to climate action activities, we are also concerned about the rest of our lending activities, in particular that there is no significant harm to the 1.5 degree scenario with the full range of our lending activities. In 2021, this exercise will be completed with the adoption of the EU taxonomy, the new EU regulation defining sustainable and climate action related activities, and this will be incorporated into the bank activities going forward. Next slide, please. We are not only adopting or approving new plans, we are also putting our money where our mouth is. You can see here the energy efficiency lending activity of the EIB in the last decade. We have gone roughly from around 1 billion of lending in 2012 to 5.8 billion of lending to energy efficiency activities in 2020. And actually, energy efficiency lending now is the largest energy subsector of the EIB. You can imagine how relevant this is in the context of a bank, which traditionally was a bank dedicated to finance infrastructure projects, infrastructure activities, to have now this significant, this big amount of lending dedicated to energy efficiency activities. Next slide, please. Around 70% of our energy efficiency lending is dedicated to buildings. The reason is also policy related. One, buildings, they have a very crucial role in all decarbonization scenarios, and in particular, the decarbonization of existing buildings. It has been calculated that in 2050, around between 75 and 90% of the buildings of the building stock in 2050 already exist today, and this is why the renovation of existing building is so important in the context of the decarbonization strategy. The EU renovation wave, the EU communication was approved with this target in mind, with a target of at least doubling the renovation rate across the EU, both in residential and non-residential building, and with the aim of renovating at least 35 million units by 2030. You can see here the average age and the average energy classification of the existing building stock. There are significant differences across country, but there is a common element across all of them, and it's the enormous potential to increase the energy performance of the existing buildings. Next slide, please. With this objective in mind, the EIB, as part of the new strategy, approved the Initiative for Building Renovation, which is known as EIBR, and basically this represents a dedicated effort to offer a package of different products, not only financing products, which were the most traditional one, but also combining this with technical assistance like the ELENA program, with new sources of finance such as mortgage-based lending or securitization, green mortgages, energy efficiency mortgages, which we are now using as one of our financial products, where we are now offering as one of our financial products, and also the aggregation of a small portfolio of investments of loans into bigger programs with the aim of offering a comprehensive package to the final beneficiaries. Next slide, please. And very briefly, let me present two case studies. One of them, our first green mortgage operation with UCI, Unión de Créditos Inmobiliarios, a specialized mortgage lender with activities in Spain and Portugal. The IB participated in the senior tranche of residential mortgage-backed security for 100 million. In exchange for this, the UCI committed to generate a new portfolio of green financing of at least 150 million for building renovation with different sub-products, including mortgages, loans to individuals for the renovation of their existing properties, and loans to homeowners associations, which we see as one of the crucial elements in promoting building renovation across the EU, in particular in those countries such as Spain, where homeowners associations represent a high percentage of the overall building stock. They manage a high percentage of the overall building stock. And also new construction with the highest energy performance levels was also included as part of the eligible green financing of the financial intermediary. One of the most innovative products as part of this offer was the SUMA product, basically a mortgage for the acquisition of an existing property, something that we do not consider eligible because this is the acquisition of an existing home, with a top-up mortgage, with a top-up loan for the renovation of that property, which we consider fully eligible. Combining these two in one single loan, we believe it's a good trigger point for the renovation, because most of the owners or the final beneficiaries, they decide to renovate the house just after they buy their property. For these operations, the UCI operation, around 25,000 square meters of new buildings will be constructed, and around 450,000 square meters of properties will be refurbished, with around 3,000 people benefiting from the investments. Next slide, please. The UCI operation was mostly dedicated to building renovation. We also promote new construction with the highest standards, in particular in those other sectors where there is another primary objective, such as social housing or hospitals or educational centers. This is one example, the operation that we did with Navarra Social Housing, also in Spain, a loan of 40 million euros to a municipal social housing company for the construction of 524 social housing units, following with implementing passive house standards with a very high impact in terms of the energy performance of the buildings. In this particular case also, we believe that using passive house standards for social housing, it complements very well, because they allow to achieve very high performance standards at a very competitive cost. The estimated savings of the projects, it's around 2,300 megawatt hour per year, with a 75% reduction against the minimum requirements in the building regulation in Spain. And also very relevant, especially in the context of the high energy prices that we are seeing these days. The energy bill for the final beneficiaries was reduced to around 75 euros per year, against the 800 euros per year of an average 30-year-old building in Navarra, in this climatic zone in Spain. This is all from my side. Happy, of course, to take questions later on. Thank you very much. I think you're muted, Mariam.
Thank you. Sorry. Thank you, Isidoro. And a reminder to everyone to write your questions in the chat. We will take them all after our second speaker will have presented. Margot, if you can change the slides. It's Karyn Sper. She's director at Multifamily Green and Healthy Housing Financing at Fannie Mae. Karyn, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I'm Isidoro. I couldn't have asked for a better lead-in, since you mentioned mortgage-based lending for energy efficiency, because that's where I'm focused, and that's what I'll be speaking about today. So to set the stage a little bit for the U.S., so we're focused specifically on the residential sector, and the residential sector accounts for about 21% of total U.S. energy consumption. So how does one manage that, and how does one improve that? There's benchmarking requirements, and they're growing across the country. There's currently dozens of cities and the whole state of California that have instituted requirements for benchmarking. They cover hundreds of thousands of properties, but these are reporting requirements. They're not efficiency requirements. We all know knowledge is the first step. You can't manage what you can't measure. And this is significant progress from 10 years ago, when it was literally only New York City, but it's still just benchmarking. There's also some new building performance standards that have come into play in the US, New York City and Washington, DC in the past 2 years, and there's some others in the works. And those performance standards will require buildings to make improvements, but they cover only a small fraction of buildings so far, and there's no financing component. It is an unfunded mandate, if you will. So Fannie Mae's space is in the middle between knowledge and requirements. We are incentivizing energy efficiency, and it's working. So since I know we have a largely European audience on the line, let me give an overview of what Fannie Mae does. I'm pretty sure a lot of people in the US don't know this either. So an overview for everybody. So Fannie Mae is a government-sponsored entity. We're not government, but we are chartered by Congress and we were established in 1938. Our mission is to support liquidity and affordability in the US housing market. And that's for both single-family homes and for multifamily properties. Now, Fannie Mae doesn't make loans. We define the box of the loans that we will purchase and securitize. So we say what we expect the credit to be and what we expect the property to, the condition of the property to be and how the underwriting should work. But we're not actually lending. We work with specific lenders that lend on our behalf, if you will. So Fannie Mae makes the connection between the lenders who are making the loans to the property owners and the investors purchasing the bonds backed by that loan. Fannie Mae purchases the loans from the lenders and securitizes them so the investor market can purchase those bonds. So the way the funds flow, the investors are purchasing bonds from Fannie Mae is purchasing the loan from the lender is making the loan to the ultimate property. And as I mentioned in the beginning, 21% of total US energy consumption is from the residential building sector. Another useful stat, Fannie Mae finances about 20% of the multifamily housing market in the US and about 30% of the single family market. Those are 2020 numbers. And that size gives us the ability to move markets in really impactful ways, such as energy efficiency. So I work on the multifamily side of Fannie Mae. I know that many parts of Europe don't do multifamily in quite the way the US does. So I want to be clear that we're talking about apartment buildings or apartment complexes with a single owner, whether that's a person or a company, and they're professionally managed properties. We're not talking about individually owned and rented units in a building. So what Fannie Multifamily does is we support loans to purchase or refinance apartment buildings or apartment complexes. We also do some cooperative buildings and manufactured housing communities, but most of what we're talking about is apartment buildings. We started a green financing program in 2010 and did our first loan in 2012. So we are talking, as Isidoro mentioned, we're talking mortgage financing, not project financing. So we're financing the whole mortgage, which includes the energy efficiency component, not just the energy efficiency project. So the way we do this, we have two different programs. The first one is Green Building Certification. So we're supporting the green building certification industry and market by recognizing properties with a green building certification that we recognize with a pricing benefit. So basically, if you have a green building certification, you get a lower interest rate on your mortgage loan. And that lower interest rate applies to the whole property, not just an energy efficiency component. Isidoro also mentioned how critical it is to improve existing buildings, the efficiency of existing housing stock. And that is where our other green financing product called Green Rewards comes in. That's for buildings that aren't so green. We're incentivizing energy and water efficiency improvements in those properties. We give them, again, a pricing benefit on their loan, so they get a lower interest rate. We also give them the opportunity to increase the loan amount slightly by underwriting a portion of the projected cost savings. So we're saying you're going to save money on your utility costs. You can underwrite a portion of that utility cost and increase your loan amount to make those improvements. So these two loan products have been around since 2015, but it took a while to reach critical mass. We needed constant support and marketing because back in 2015, we were teaching lenders and property owners a new language. You know, in 2015, we had people calling and asking us about LEEDs certifications with an S. And now we've got lenders calling and asking us, you know, nitty-gritty details about toilet retrofits. It's an amazing change over just a handful of years. But it did mean that it was a pretty slow program to start. So we released these programs in 2015, didn't even do our first loan until 2016. But in 2017, we did $23 billion of these loans. So lenders and borrowers understand and they have figured it out. Some of the other things that we've learned that interest rate benefit is really critical. The multifamily borrowers that we work with are far more driven by the economics of the loan than by environmental or social impacts. And I'm speaking broadly there. There are absolutely some multifamily property owners and managers that really care about the environmental and the social. But in the big picture, most of them want that interest rate benefit. But that's fine. They're still doing the energy efficiency work and we're still seeing that benefit. So progress and impact. We have done $87 billion of these loans through the end of 2020. And that $87 billion has been securitized as green bonds. We are the largest issuer of green bonds in the world over the last 10 years. And the green bond aspect actively supports the liquidity part of Fannie Mae's mission because we're bringing in new investors to Fannie Mae securities. These are socially responsible investors that previously would not have been buying Fannie Mae securities, but they're here because we have green bonds. And diversifying our investor base directly supports the liquidity part of our mission. Green lending also supports the affordability part of our mission. Utility cost savings at properties where there are tenant savings because the improvements are being made to the tenant units average $184 per household per year. And that savings is particularly significant for lower income households, which are more energy cost burdened than higher income households. Some studies show that low income households spend 3 times more of their income on energy costs than other households. And lastly, there's the environmental benefit. Our green loans are projected to save 9.5 billion kBTU and prevent 634,000 metric tons of greenhouse gas emissions annually. And those numbers grow over time as we add more green loans. So in conclusion, we do this because we think it's good business and it supports our mission in multiple ways. But we are always looking for ways to increase impact and drive deeper energy efficiency. So I'm really looking forward to hearing the ways that other folks have found to finance and incentivize energy efficiency. And maybe we'll hear some ideas that we can use here at Fannie Mae. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much, Karyn. We now open the floor to the Q&A. I see there are 2 questions already here, which I think are related. So a question to both of you, please try to be precise but concise. How would you describe in general the role of financial institution in the energy efficiency retrofit storyline until now? And what should their role be considering the challenges to scaling? I don't know, Isidoro, if you want to take that first.
Yes, with in full honesty, the role of financial institutions so far has been limited in the energy efficiency retrofit, at least in Europe. When you look at the numbers, most of the energy efficiency retrofits are financed with savings or with the equity of the homeowners, and only a limited number of renovations are financed with third-party financing or with loans. And this is a crucial aspect because from an economic point of view, most of or many of the energy efficiency measures in the retrofits, they have very long payback periods, and you need to have access to long-term financing of 10 or 15 years in order for these measures to be implemented, in order to match the payback of these measures. So this is an obstacle. This is a very important aspect of the low uptake of energy efficiency renovation so far, and definitely this is something that all institutions are working to improve and to accelerate in the coming years.
Thank you. Karyn?
Sure. So there's no magic to what we're doing. Anyone could do green financing and energy efficiency financing, but we wouldn't be doing it if we didn't think it was good business. And I think that each financial institution needs to figure out what that means for them. For us, it was kind of a natural progression because we have this liquidity component, green feeds into it, affordability, green feeds into it. We don't have any kind of environmental mandate, but we know that's the right thing to do. But in the end, it has to make sense for business. I think there's also, honestly, some concerns from our end about the EU green bond taxonomy that is in the works, because the green bonds are a critical part of our business. The socially responsible investor demand for those bonds does move markets. And I think that it is challenging to apply that EU green bond taxonomy to mortgage financing because of the use of proceeds clauses. So I think that that's certainly going to be a challenge for other businesses to do this kind of lending as well.
Thank you. We have another question. So what would you say is the first step for a project developer that is interested in financing a large multifamily housing energy efficiency retrofit, both in the EU and the US? What should be the first step for them to start that process and to make sure that the project is financed?
I can start with that one, sure. So in the US, so we are not the only ones that do green lending in the US. You know, Freddie Mac was kind of our counterpart, and other businesses do this kind of work as well. But I would say talk to a lender that has a green financing program. We work with 24 lenders at Fannie Mae. There's many others across the country, and make sure you understand their requirements. Our program is based around projected savings and committing to a certain level of work that is projected to meet those savings levels, the energy efficiency and potentially some water efficiency or renewable energy generation. But I think the very first step is making sure that you understand what the requirements are, so you don't miss any steps along the way.
Isidoro?
Yes, I would only add that I mean, internal governance, and in particular in the case of multi-apartments, we have seen in practice how it is important also to ensure that the decision is taken collectively, and that everyone is on board in that decision, because this can complicate the process in very significantly. And also, even if there are different aspects, the financing is one important element, but also the technical design of the renovations are an important element of the renovations, of course. So it is important to be able to have access either to someone that can offer a comprehensive package with the financial and technical elements, or to different counterparts that can offer this as part of their of their product offer. So it is important to take into account the decision, the decision elements within the multi-apartment, the financial side, but also the technical side.
Thank you very much to you both. We're now closing this session. Before moving to the second one, we have a polling question for you that should appear on the right hand of your screen. I still can't see it, but I can read it out. So for all the participants, the question is, do you think we are on track to meet our national and regional climate goals with the current available business model for financing energy efficiency, or do we need more?
I'm seeing that there's no active polls at the moment. I don't know if anybody else is seeing that as well.
Seems to be the case. So I think since they do not appear, we'll just move to the second section and might keep this question for afterwards if we solve the technical glitch with the polling. Apologies for this. So we moving on now to our second session, where we will really hear from 4 different experiences, 2 in Europe and 2 in the US. As I mentioned before, we have Michele Russo, Davide Canarotti, Holmes, Hummel, and Peter Ludwig as our speakers. I think without further ado, I would just give the floor to Michele, who is the founder and chairman of Epta Prime, and will give us a presentation of the super bonus retrofit program that Italy is implementing.
Thank you, Mariangela. Will you share the presentation, by the way? So, okay, great. So we can start. Thanks a lot to everybody. We now have some time to talk about the Italian way, the super bonus 110%, which is a piece of legislation which is rather new. Actually, it started its operations, let's put it this way, last year, and it came through some minor adjustments during this time, and is leading good results so far. We can go to the first slide. If can you move it to the first slide? The other one, the following. Okay. So what are we talking about? What is this super bonus? Basically, the super bonus 110% is a tax credit on energy efficiency expenses. The tax credit is subject to some conditions that we will see in a while, and it's a temporary benefit. So far, it's until the end of 2023. How does it work? For every euro spent in energy efficiency, the owner of the dwelling gets 1.1 euro of tax credit. This credit can be used to compensate every tax liability with the government. So I mean taxes at government and local level, social contribution, which are extremely important in this country. This happens in a period of 5 years with equal installments for each year. So just to give you an example, if I have 100,000 in energy efficiency expenses, I get 110,000 of total tax credit, which means 22,000 as a yearly allowance for the following 5 years. As I was saying, the super bonus is subject to some conditions. What are the conditions? Next slide, please. Can we go to the next slide? Okay, there it is. First of all, let me point out very clearly that the credit is for the owner of the dwelling, but the super bonus targets buildings. So the entire building, not the single dwelling, has to do what? Has to jump at least 2 energy classes. If the building is in class G, you see in the right hand side of the slide, you have to reach after the super bonus class E. If it's in E, you have to reach the class C. I want to mention this because it's extremely important, because all of you can agree that the higher the starting class, the more difficult it is to jump to classes. This is why the super bonus actually targets mainly buildings of the 50s, 60s, and 70s of last century, which are the least energy efficient. So it's a measure that really targets let's say, the emergency that we have in these countries. Lots of buildings of the last century, which are extremely inefficient from an energy point of view. We can go to next slide. What can you do to jump to classes? Of course, you are allowed to make some technical interventions. Technical interventions may be divided into 2 categories. One, we can call it main works, and the other one can be called secondary works. Main works, it's basically thermal insulation of at least 25% of the surface of the building and heating place replacement. Secondary works are, for example, window frames, solar panels, and electric car charges. The latter, electric car charges, of course, has few to do with energy efficiency. It's an additional measure that the government decided to step in just in order to incentivize the development of electric cars and motorbikes. What is important is that the combination of main and secondary works at the end of the intervention must lead to the required result, which is the jump of 2 classes. Needless to say, the ex-ante and ex-post status of the building from an energetic point of view must be certified by a qualified professional. Otherwise, there is no way you can get the tax benefit. We can go to the next slide. Who can benefit from the super bonus? Super bonus is not for everybody. As I was saying, it targets residential buildings of private owners. So to start, companies do not qualify for the super bonus. Companies may use other forms of incentives, for example, the so-called eco bonus that has lower rates, and so far even the so-called facade bonus that has a very high rate, although it's not that high as the super bonus. But they cannot use the 100% super bonus. Social housing entities, although sometimes are organized as companies in these countries, have a special rule. They can have access to the super bonus and have a special regime because they have a longer period to carry out the works. This happens because they are subject to very strict anti-burglary laws, and this leads to longer procedures with respect to the buildings owned by ordinary people. We can go to next slide, sorry. What can you do with your tax credit? Once that you got it, as a beneficiary, you have 3 different options. You can simply use it in front of your liabilities. I have to pay taxes. I don't put down money. I use my tax credit. You can trade it with other taxpayers, this time including companies. So everybody who pays tax in this country can buy from a private owner of a dwelling the tax credit and use it for its benefit. Otherwise, you can also swap it with the company that is performing the works in exchange for a 100% invoice discount. This is rather new here in Italy, I think, and it's something that needs to be talked about a little more. So we can go to next slide. As I was saying, the invoice discount is the big news of the super bonus. It's in general terms the possibility to trade tax credit is the news of the super bonus. The trading of the taxpayer allows small taxpayers, property owners, or small medium companies in the construction industry to pass on the benefit to big taxpayers that can buy them at a discounted price. This is why the figure is 110%, because the 10% is intended to cover also the financial cost of the discount of the 5-year tax benefit. With this invoice discount option that you have, that so far has been the preferred choice of homeowners can directly transfer, companies can directly transfer the tax credit to the, homeowners can directly transfer the tax credit to the companies performing the works in exchange for a 100% discount on the invoices. Let me spend some words on this, and let me give you an example. Suppose the company A invoices owner B for 100,000 euro of works. The invoice that the company A will issue will look like this. It will have works for 100,000, discount 100,000, and net due 0. Now, once the discount has been made in the invoice, company A holds a 110,000 tax credit and can either use it or trade it. This is a tool that allows everybody to do its own energy efficient investment, basically at no cost. So this is really the big news of the super bonus, in my opinion. Next slide, please. Is it working? Apparently, yes. The results are in line with the expectation. So far, at the end of the month of August, super bonus accounted for 5.6 billion euro worth of renovation interventions. I have to say a couple of things, that some minor adjustment have been made to the super bonus law quite recently. One regards the owners meeting resolution for the authorization of the works. As I was saying before, super bonus targets the entire building. Okay, so this means that the owners have to agree on the possibility to make energy efficient interventions. Usually, the owners meeting are rather messy, I would say. And so since major renovations need to have a big majority, a new piece of legislation decided to cut this majority up to down to the level of 30%. So right now, if 30% of the owners agree to make super bonus interventions, then the super bonus intervention can be made. This really helped to speed up the process. This is extremely important because it really boosted the super bonus. I have to say some words even to, let me anticipate it a little, to minor abuses, construction abuses. What happened in this country, especially during the 50s, 70s, 60s and 70s of last centuries, there were some construction abuses, which are difference between what has been authorized and what has been definitely at the end realized. Sometimes even minor abuses, for example, an additional small window or something like that, could block the authorization for the super bonus. So another piece of legislation allowed the condominium, the building, to pass on these minor abuses only if you are planning the super bonus. We can go to next slide. How is it going? Is it creating, for example, a financial bubble? Most likely, no, we don't see that. The financial activity associated with the super bonus is quite simple. At the very end of the story, we are only trading a tax credit a certain number of times. From a financial point of view, the super bonus tax credit is quite similar to a 5-year treasury bill issued by the Italian government. The 5-year treasury bill is a well-known, liquid and widely traded asset. So really, we do not see room for financial speculation. Next slide, please. Are we creating a housing bubble? Probably no. Of course, we don't have the data available so far, but we expect the value of renewed houses to have a premium over the premium value of the unrenewed one. And this echoes basically what happened in Italy 30 years ago with self-heated dwellings. It happened pretty much the same. Self-heated dwellings actually were sold at a premium price. Since the Superbonus will be in place until the end of 2023 and targets a specific segment of the building stock, we believe that the market has time to assess itself. In any case, we can say that the premium value could have two positive effects. The first one for the owners, as it strengthens their investment, and the second for the banks that often hold dwellings as collateral for mortgages. We can go to next slide. Is it boosting, is it creating an excess of demand in renovation? The answer is absolutely yes. We can say that the Superbonus revamped the construction industry and that and all the activity of the professionals involved, I mean engineers and architects, and it's giving momentum to an industry that, at least in this country, was languishing. We have to keep in mind that the construction industry has a very high multiplier, so we are expecting a wide impact on GDP growth. Next slide. Boosting price of raw materials. Is it the case? Is it, I mean, the Superbonus fault? We don't think so. We are observing a price increase of raw materials and appliances, but this, in our opinion, has a lot to do with the general situation of logistics that the world war is experiencing. It's difficult for me to go into details, but access to the Superbonus, to the tax credit, is subject to the control of prices of raw materials and work in progress that have to be exposed in the project and have to be approved by the relevant authorities. These authorities, in case of high prices, can, of course, control the project. So high prices trigger controls, and so they really have to be avoided. We are not, in any case, seeing any particular effect on the price of raw materials. Next slide, please. At the end of the story, the Superbonus has several positive effects. From one side, it changed people's mind on EE intervention, focusing mainly on the benefits, value increase of the dwellings, less energy consumption, and more comfortable houses. Allowing the tradability of tax credit, not only for the Superbonus, but also for other bonuses, it made the EE investment affordable to almost all families. And it also boosts the economy in a period of depression. On the other side, we have to say that it artificially created an excess of demand. Construction companies are often fully engaged and look for big projects, big buildings, at the expense of smaller ones. In order to address this issue, so to give to everybody to have the possibility to make the energy efficiency intervention, in our mind, the Superbonus should have a longer time frame. Now it will land in 2023. Hopefully, it should be. The optimum would be to have it as a permanent benefit. But hopefully it should be at least have a 7 to 10 years time frame. We can go to the next slide, which is the last one. Feel free to write. Thanks for your attention. Any inquiry, I will be more than willing to answer it. And thanks a lot once again.
Thank you very much, Michele. A reminder to everyone to write your questions in the chat, whether it's about this presentation or any other presentations that you will see or that you have already heard. We now go to our next speaker, which is Davide Canarotti, is Chief Executive Officer and founder of GNE Finance, and he will present some of the project that GNE Finance is working on. Davide?
Yes, good afternoon, and thank you very much to BPIE for organizing this bilateral webinar between the US and Europe. It's a pleasure to be part of it, and thanks very much to all the people participating in the audience.
Davide, sorry, your camera is off. I don't know if you will be able to turn it on, maybe?
Sure, thank you very much for reminding me. Now it should be on.
Great, thank you.
Okay, yes. Let me give you a first quick introduction about GNE Finance, and let's go with a quick provocation. So if you can go to the next slide. We believe that the energy transition is the most significant economic opportunity of the 21st century, at least the foreseeable future. Yet we argue that we are still astonishingly unprepared for this challenge, and I can see that we are still at the beginning of this process, regarding the fact that the time is running against us, and the effect on the climate and its impact on populations are visible in our daily news. So it's time to get prepared and time to get to action. So let's go to the next one, please. When it comes to GNE Finance, so GNE Finance was created at the end of 2016 with the goal to really make a difference in what is the ecological transition. GNE Finance is a high-impact investment company focused on the energy transition, empowering individuals, communities, and organizations to make their homes and buildings more sustainable. So we want to be an agent in being able to decarbonize the place where we live. And the way that we conduct our business, our services, is focused on creating a triple bottom line approach, which as most you know, is an impact that is not just economic, but also a strong focus on environmental and social impacts. Therefore, any initiative or project that we pursue has to have these three components. Otherwise, it's not eligible for being considered by our company. As of today, next slide, please. As you can see, our formula for providing our services to both government and private counterparties is based on these formula that we call the private-public partnership, that has three components. So the technical assistance, the social financing, and the smart funding. Why? Because we, in our experience and our knowledge of the energy efficiency market, we detected that financing per se or investment per se are not enough to trigger demand. Quite often it is mentioned in these type of forums that the market is lacking of financing and funding. We argue rather the opposite. We argue that as of today, as we saw from the efforts made by multilateral institutions and most recently by capital markets, there is a huge influx of capital towards the green finance, but still there is a difficulty in the deployment of this finance. And the difficulty is because there's a lack of demand, or demand needs to be structured, aggregated, prepared for becoming bankable, for becoming financeable. And that's what we do. And that's what we provide is assistance, advice, and support to the programs that we serve, the clients that we work for, so that it can be evaluated which type of measures can be implemented, which are the most cost benefits and most aligned with the needs of our clients. Then we work with the public administration so that to have guidance from local public administration in terms of the goals that they want to reach, and that's what we call the smart funding. But also to be sure that the financing or the investments that we provide have private capital on one side, but on the other side that they can be accessible to most of citizens. And the way of doing it is de-risking the investments and the portfolio of investment that we have with the support of public funding. So that is the component of social financing coupled with smart funding. These three elements really create that trust and that quality in the project that we support, so that it triggers the demand, which is the willingness to renovate and to go through the effort and the painful process that still is today is making an energy efficient home or building renovation. Next slide, please. So today we are present with our advisory work in 8 different European initiatives in 4 countries, which are Spain, France, Netherlands, and Italy, and growing. We are part of consortiums of institutions and companies that are focused on just one goal, which is the decarbonization of the built environment, with a strong focus on the residential sector. Next slide. The case study that I would like to present to you today is on Opengela. Opengela is the spin-off of one of these international collaboration that I mentioned to you before. It is an initiative, as we can see in the next slide, developed in cooperation and in partnership with the Basque Country government. The Basque Country, for international audience, is the region around the city of Bilbao and the beautiful Guggenheim Museum. It is in the northeast part of Spain. It is a small but densely populated region. And as we will see, the built environment and the residential buildings are very old and inefficient. The weather is pretty cold and wet compared to the classic image that we have about the sunny Spain. That is an image that corresponds more to the parts of Spain that are on the Mediterranean. And therefore, this is an ideal space for testing and piloting solutions for energy efficiency in buildings. The characteristic of the Opengela programs, it is a public-private collaboration between Gini Finance and the Basque government for the development of one-stop shops in vulnerable neighborhoods of 4 cities that are piloting these programs, which are Bilbao, Eibar, Durango, and Lasarte. The program, as we will see, it is strongly based on subsidies. And these raise the question if it is economically self-sustainable in the mid to long term, which is a point that we will discuss later. Next slide, please. So the Opengela programs build up its service based on the experience that the Basque government and Gini Finance developed in the past. And it has 4th component, which is the technical support, the trusted contractors affordable financing, and customer support. All these elements are geared toward guaranteeing that these one-stop shops are able to identify vulnerable neighborhoods of the vast country where the home renovation, energy efficient home renovation is highly in need, where the best measures are identified and cost effective, consider the idiosyncrasy of the different buildings and neighborhoods, and that the capacity building of the market can be verified. In other words, we have been learning from other programs and other initiatives that one of the main issues when it comes to home renovation and implementing energy efficiency in home renovation is the lack of capacity. Still, the building sector is not properly prepared to implement the energy efficiency measures in the right way. Therefore, a program that can work with contractors, that can provide training and verification that contractors are the right one to be able to execute the works at the quality that is expected is key. So to be sure that these improvements in the energy efficiency letters and therefore in the comfort and the energy demand of the buildings is real and not just some greenwashing based on nice PowerPoints like the one that I'm showing to you. And then we have the funding and financing, which is key in order to be able to ensure that the projects that are identified, that are studied, that are presented to community homeowners, that are finally voted and accepted, have the right elements to be financed and to be executed at affordable conditions for every citizen, and not only for the lucky ones that have the equity to do the measures by themselves. As we learned from the EIB, that still most of these type of projects are executed by people's equity, which means this is another potential issue in the inequality gap, that the energy transition will favor the ones that have the resources to implement these type of measures. Next slide, please. So what is the program structure? As I said, we have three pillars: technical assistance, smart finance, and affordable finance. The three components are put together in order to serve the one-stop shop local offices, so that they can provide these services that we mentioned before to the citizens, and so that eventually the real beneficiary of this type of services are citizens. So the technical assistance is the setup, management, coordination, the communication, marketing, of course, because it's very important people can get to know this type of initiatives, the training and validation of contractors, as we discussed before, is key. But it's also important to be sure that the subsidies and grants that are offered by the public administration, in this case by the Basque government, to the cities that are participating in the program, these subsidies have to be coupled with financing, as the subsidies are never at 100% of the required investment. Therefore, what we could provide as a G&E finance, thanks to our investment vehicle that we set up with the support of the Fundación Repsol and the investment impact fund of Repsol Impacto Social, is long-term financings up to 15 years at 100% of the upfront investment, or what is needed to be financed of the investment, coupled with a de-risking mechanism, which is a social guarantee fund. That's the way that we gave to this type of instruments, that put the public funding as a first loss tranche of the investment vehicle that finance the loans to citizens. In this way, there's a de-risking of the overall portfolio, which gives us the possibility to offer financing also to vulnerable people. In which way? Well, that's what we can see in the next slide. And bear in mind that this structure is still new. It's already working, but it's a working in progress. So there are components of it that are still in the making. So the idea is that the program, as you can see, there's here on bottom left, is a graphic that shows that there is a 50% grant that is provided by the Basque government to the community of homeowners. And so this grant goes to the project. And then there's a remaining grant, which is the yellow one, the Basque government aids for particulars, which is a grant that is that goes from 0 to 30% of the eligible investments, that is based on the an assessment of the vulnerability of the single household that compose the community of homeowners. So there is still an area that goes from 50 to 30%, which is the blue and green area that needs to be financed, and that's the financing that we provide, where the green one is provided fully thanks to private capital, because it is about individuals that have enough capacity of credit so that it can be financed through private financing. And then the blue one, we serve it in the following way. Next slide, please.
Davide, in order to stay on time, we need you to wrap up in a minute or so.
Sure. Go ahead to the next slide, please. So in here, in this slide, you can see that we classify homeowners in green, yellow, or red. Red are those homeowners that have no capacity of credit, therefore they need 100% of subsidy. Green, on the other side, are those homeowners that can be served through private financing, and yellows are the ones that require this guarantee provided by the Social Guarantee Fund, which is funded through public funding, and that therefore can access to financing. This is thanks to the de-risking mechanisms that we have been implementing in this instrument, and we believe that could be replicated at a larger scale for larger implementations. Next slide, please. So here we see that our financing conditions improve depending on the how many letters are improved in the home renovation process. From 1 to 2 to up to 3 or more letters, there's a discount on the interest loan. And last slide, please. These are just some information about the project that we don't have time to go. There's an issue here that I would like to put to your attention. Contrary to what we have been learning about the Italian market by our colleagues, in the Spanish market, there's already clear evidence of a strong spike in the cost of raw materials and equipment. Therefore, the risk that subsidies might see offset by the increase in cost is very high. This is a risk that programs have to keep it in mind and look for solutions for it. And next slide. My closing remarks to you. The market, as I say, is underserved because of lack of demand. So we need to find a way to stimulate this demand. The public administration must be out of the way when private sector can intervene, but be extremely active where the private sector needs it, which is in de-risking portfolios, in promoting the demand, and be sure that initiatives are on a large scale and national way. Opt-out program needs to be implemented. It's not possible for private players to intervene in this jigsaw of situations of markets in which each city and each region has a different implementation. So there's a strong need for aggregation, for standardization, and for large implementations of programs, which is not what we are observing in the Spanish market. And therefore, there's a strong message for Spanish regulators and other regulators to intervene to provide scale to programs. And in this regard, last comment, the minimum energy performance standard requirements that are under discussion for the next EPBD are key in order to ensure the uptake of this type of solutions and programs, where we need a strong boost in this market if we want to be compliant with the goals established for 2030 and 2050. Thank you very much for your attention. I'm looking forward for your questions.
Thank you, Davide. Let's, without further ado, move to our next speaker. Italian man, they talk a lot. Let's see if our American counterparts can stick to time. Just a reminder, when you see me appearing, when you're presenting, you still have about 2.5 minutes to conclude. So, Holmes, Executive Director at Clean Energy Works, welcome. The floor is yours. Use your time wisely. Thank you.
Thank you. It is certainly a privilege to be invited to this transatlantic dialogue. I'm honored by the company that we have in this panel, and I've learned a great deal from the expertise. I want to thank our hosts for creating a context for a conversation that's not only about learning, but also testing our sobriety against the scale of our challenge and the need for our industry to be creative about how we source and deploy capital to the built environment. I will be moving rapidly through a series of visual aids that are in 2 sections. The first, and please proceed past the title here, the first of my remarks will focus on the problems of scale that have not been addressed by instruments we've heard about yet today. And the second will be a solution-oriented response to that remaining challenge. Please proceed. The next slide reflects the organization that I founded, Clean Energy Works, after my period of service as the Senior Policy Advisor to the United States Department of Energy's Office of Policy and International Affairs. In my role as the Senior Policy Advisor there during the period of 4 years, the United States had the highest level of investment in the clean energy economy in its history up to this point. And yet we were still leaving tens of millions of people behind. We were not able to reach those who needed to be reached most, and we were leaving behind us a problem that we knew we would face in the future. Go ahead and tap once again. The motto of our organization is that we have 100% clean energy targets. That means we need to have financial solutions that reach everyone, everywhere. Now, the next slide, I would like to ask you to move past quickly because it is an introduction of myself that I've also alluded to, and any of those who are interested can find a profile of me online or even here in this Webex session. In the next slide, you'll see the titles of the 2 sections, and I want to move swiftly into the problem frame with a systemic analysis about why the financial instruments we've heard about that emanate from the banking industry's loan products will probably not accommodate us to the future we know we need to achieve. Let's go ahead to the next slide. This work by Professor Tony Reams at the University of Michigan describes in an eloquent illustration why we have a gap that is larger than we think. On the left-hand side, it's the number of households that we think can be served with the social programs that we just heard of Davide appealing to the Spanish authorities to please fund more robustly. We have a similar challenge in the United States. And on the right-hand side, we have those people who can be reached with credit products, presuming that they are deemed to be worthy of the credit the market would offer for the risk profile that they present. I've unpacked that whole sentence for those of you I know are deeply fluent in this field of credit-based financing to point out that there are actually a large number of reasons that people can be disqualified or would be disinterested from volunteering to take on a debt obligation for the purpose of raising the performance of the building in which they reside or one they own but don't reside in. If you tap forward once more, you will see the talking points here for those that may come along behind us just with these visual aids to point out that never in the history of the United States have we had an adequate level of political capital to sufficiently fund the unmet needs for those people who live in housing with low income. And on the right-hand side, we have never been able to observe in any market in the United States a sufficient level of appetite among people who are even qualified for debt products that they will stampede into the marketplace to go further into debt in order to pay for energy efficiency upgrades. And these two things combine for a worrisome perfect storm in the next 10, 20, and 30 years. Let's go ahead to the next slide. The policy response to date, even dating back to my own service as the founder of the finance working group at the Department of Energy, is that we actually were banking on a policy that presumed that building owners would in fact volunteer to take on debt and pay for these upgrades. And if they didn't, if you tap once ahead, you would find that the policy response to anemic loan rates is that the government would set up special financial programs and make that debt more appealing if it was specifically for building upgrades. This special kind of pricing that you might have heard Karyn describe in the opening of this workshop. If you tap once more, you'll see a whole collection of live experiments running in the United States today, tinkering with the different instruments that are available to change the pricing or the relative level of attractiveness that debt products can be presented in our very active market for selling money in the United States. And also, we have studied over the last 10 years the performance of these different experiments and their potential for fiscal sustainability and scale. Let's go to the next slide. This past summer, the national labs produced the most comprehensive study of the most successful and famous even state-backed debt programs that are specially priced for energy efficiency upgrades in 4 states. And those 4 states account for about 17 million households, around about 5% of our population. So it's a sample size. But what's important to see in the data that you can just observe here is 2 important factors. One is that there has never been a year in the past decade when all of these programs were underway, or even before that when one of them was an early starter, that the market penetration was greater than 0.1%. And we also can see that 3 of the 4 programs experienced at least one peak, and even if they bounced back, they peaked again and declined. This is directly related to the level of political capital that was required to sustain the financial capital that was required to subsidize those programs and keep them available to their marketplace. And in the next slide, you will see a companion graph from the same study that surprised, I think, all of us, to show that 90% of the products that were marketed as special loans for energy efficiency landed in the hands of people who today would be able to qualify for a drive-through loan through some of our fintech marketplace offerings that are now online. This was very surprising. We started to worry then about whether or not our special policy responses to the lack of available financing in the market segments that we knew were underserved were actually reaching the buildings that we knew would struggle the most to recapitalize as better buildings. Let's go forward. So the response to the challenges of our prior responses. In other words, I come to you today with 10 years of humility and sobriety from having worked on the public policy responses to the lack of adequate capitalization of energy efficiency. And we have come to see that there is actually another path forward that involves considering financial products being made available through another part of our economy, not the financial services sector's retail window directly, but actually out of that sector and into the electric power sector, where the electric power sector has a commercial relationship with every single building that has a light bulb, and that those utilities can deploy capital and recover it on terms that are already regulated by economic regulators that determine those terms to be just, reasonable, and fair. And they have demonstrated a 99.9% cost recovery. It's astonished all of us who've been watching this field. Let's go ahead and see how this works. Oh, excuse me, I forgot the first slide that I wanted to show you is where it is working. So all of those parts of the United States shaded in the darkest blue here have had decisions taken by the economic regulators of their power sector that are approving or ordering to be approved the concept of site-specific investment and cost recovery. The lighter blue states are ones where there are proceedings underway by a utility or its regulators or the state legislation to see about introducing a similar type of policy. Let's move ahead. So in its most elementary form, what's happening here is that the utility that has always and already been pricing its services on the left hand of this diagram by incurring costs and spreading them over everyone in ways that lead to endless controversy, are using the modern technologies of information technologies and computers and meters to make site-specific investments with site-specific cost recovery. The utility is deploying money and retrieving it again without indebting the occupant or the owner of the building. That means money can flow to any piece of real estate, regardless of the income, credit score, or renter status of the occupant or owner at that site. This is a transformative concept for moving capital into places where we know there are lucrative investments that are under-realized in the clean energy economy. Please move ahead. One thing we know is that in all of the places where the inclusive utility investment programs have been introduced, a majority of the people who receive an offer from their utility accept it. And an offer comes after the utilities program operator has had a chance to assess the building. So once they identify that there are cost-effective upgrades at that location, they will offer to the resident the energy upgrades here that will save you money can be installed in your building with nothing up front paid by you. Next slide, next tap. The utility will pay for the installation and recover its cost with a charge on your bill that is less than the estimated savings, which produces positive cash flow for that bill payer. Next slide. There is no loan, there is no lien on this property, and there is no consumer debt associated with this transaction. That's important from a risk protection perspective for the occupant, a major consumer protection. And the next slide. When the utility recovers its cost with the charge on the bill that's less than the estimated savings from these upgrades, the charges will also end. And if the upgrade should fail to work at any point during cost recovery, or if you move away, the charges will end and you have no more financial responsibility. In other words, you're only participating in cost recovery at the site as long as you are here and these upgrades are working. Next slide. The cash flow diagram that goes with the design that I've just described actually taps the competitive capital markets at the wholesale level. This means that we're drawing in large amounts of low-cost capital through the power sector's utility industry and diffusing it into the landscape through solution providers that are able to transact at, say, tens of thousands of dollars rather than millions or billions. Those solution providers install upgrades at locations where customers are interested in all of the value proposition that Davide did discuss: better comfort, lower costs, so on and so forth. And if you tap once more, you'll see how the customer who resides at that location now or in the future participates in the cost recovery until the utilities costs have been recovered and their obligations to the capital provider are fully fulfilled. Let's keep going. A profile here of a sample transaction at a single site is provided to us by a program operator in Kentucky. It's a good one I like because it uses round numbers. But truthfully, in the United States, I would say the average is a little bit less than $10,000 of cost-effective upgrades in most residential buildings that have a bill of $1,000 to $2,000 a year. Now, what you will see is that these numbers look a lot like a loan. And viewers with us today might say, this just looks like a consumer loan. I don't see the difference. Let's go to the next slide. Here you see in a side-by-side, it looks like some of the colors from the top may not have come through, but the attributes of a consumer loan are in the first column, and the attributes of a utility site-specific tariff are in the right-hand column. And these are not just words on the page. They are material differences in the consumer value proposition that result in two very important things. One, a massively expanded addressable market. No more systematic disqualification based on who owns property, what their income is, and whether or not they have been deemed to be worthy of the credit products offered by the financial services sector. That vastly expanded addressable market brings them to people who want services but have not been able to have their demands met. And that unmet demand can be converted with the utility value proposition that I've just described. And that results in a vastly larger conversion than the close rate of consumer loans. Let's go forward. The difference in magnitude of these contrasts can be represented here mathematically. If you think about 50% of the households being categorically disqualified by features like they don't own their property, or they don't have adequate credit history to be qualified for this loan, or they don't have adequate income, that's easily half of the United States by residential household population. And if you look at the inclusive utility investment program, it's everyone who's eligible. So you get a double size of the addressable market. You get an offer acceptance rates that easily is 5 times the loan close rate of the financial services sector. And you get deeper savings with larger investments up front in order to capitalize all of the things that are cost effective at that site and not just cream skimming those that would pay back the fastest. These 3 factors actually are multiplying effects. Double the number of people who are eligible saying yes 5 times as often to twice as much energy efficiency actually produces an order of magnitude more capital flow into these landscapes. And we have observed that kind of data at the micro scale where we are able to track the results of the utilities offering these investments. Let's go to the next slide. The 3 slides I'm closing with will fly by quickly. Take note of them if this idea is interesting for you to explore further. I want to acknowledge that the Department of Energy has one of the most popular short issue briefs on this concept, and it was produced by their Clean Energy for Low-Income Communities Accelerator because of their own concern of this so-called donut hole, the gigantic, unaddressed, and lucrative energy efficiency investments we haven't capitalized yet and must to reach 100% targets. You can find this issue brief easily online by searching any of the words you see here on the page. And likewise with the next slide, a longer guide for how to get started with any of the economic regulators that you know in the electric power sector who have this vast and massive authority to unleash low-cost capital at large scale into underserved market segments and animate all of the energy efficiency industries that we know are eager to get into these buildings. This guide is also available freely online. The utility guide for tariffed on-bill terms will get you there. And the last slide is the cover of what is still today the top internet search result for the phrase accessible financing. It is the conclusion of a 6-month stakeholder process in the state of California, where energy efficiency was not only a concern, but also was full decarbonization of the buildings. And the Building Decarbonization Coalition flexed every type of financial mechanism they could find. They asked everyone in the rafters from Wall Street to Los Angeles. They wrung out everything that they could to find that, in fact, utility inclusive investments using a tariff would give them their best prospects of achieving the California climate goals, which are among the most ambitious in our country. I thank you for your patience in getting through all of that material in both sections, but I hope that my treatment of both the problem and a promising solution will animate more discussion in the dialogue. Thank you again for welcoming this contribution.
Thank you very much, Holmes. We now move on and give the floor to Peter Ludwig, Senior Manager of Market Engagement at the Connecticut Green Bank. We will use the remaining time after his presentation for a Q&A. Peter, please go ahead with your presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the opportunity to be here and involved in this great conversation. So we can go to the I guess the next slide. So just a quick agenda. It's actually moves pretty quickly, but I'll talk a little bit about Connecticut just to help orient everybody, and then this talk will really be in kind of two parts. One is a little bit about the Connecticut Green Bank and what we do, and then I'll talk a little more about some of the programs we run in the multifamily residential space and single family as a way of kind of talking about the thing that I'm most concerned with, which is how to approach the market. What products or programs seem relevant and helpful to people at what times, and sort of how I think about engaging customers. So please go to the next slide. So Connecticut, there's this really interesting website called thetruesize.com where you can sort of take almost any like political landmass boundary and compare it. So I have put Connecticut in the Northeast US up against Switzerland and France. So as you can see, we are tiny. We have a pretty high population density, and we have both, I think, the highest energy cost per kilowatt hour in the US and also high levels of wealth inequality. We're also, our state regulators and government are aiming for a zero carbon electricity grid by 2014. And I, of course, encourage you all to visit. We don't have any real mountains, but it is a beautiful state. Next slide, please. So a little bit about the Connecticut Green Bank. We've been around for about 10 years. We were created by state statute with the initial focus to really try to grow financing for clean energy. The theory of the Green Bank is that, ultimately that with aggressive carbon and decarbonization goals, there's not enough funding, there's not enough grants and sort of public money to reach those goals. So the Connecticut Green Bank is designed to take some small amounts of public money and leverage private capital. We are supported by electric ratepayer charges. We also receive some competitive and non-competitive federal resources. We are supported by interest income, some impact investments, and also we receive a portion of the funds from there's something called the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, which is a coalition of states in the Northeast that have created a cap and trade program for clean energy. So let's go to the next slide, please. Can you click it a couple more times to see if, yeah, 2 more. Okay, so this is basically the idea. Can we go back once? Thank you. The idea is basically for customers who work with us and work with lenders in our programs that, they're still going to be paying their energy bill, but there's going to be savings and cash flow. So we're going to have cleaner, more reliable buildings that are healthier from the retrofit projects and the clean energy installations. And overall, we're going to be improving building performance and energy costs. Can we go to the next slide, please? And I'm not going to go through all of these. Obviously, it's just these are just some of the ways we think about the impact of the Green Bank's work. And one thing I did want to flag, though, is just on the top left-hand corner of the investment, we're really focused on trying to get as much private capital into Connecticut's clean energy economy, because we think that that's a real opportunity. And so far, I think we've been pretty successful. So let's go to the next slide. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, the Green Bank. I mean, you can look on our website, and I'm always happy to have follow-up conversations, but we run a bunch of different kinds of programs, everything from consumer-facing green bonds to we actually, relevant to Holmes's presentation, we partner with electric utility on an on-bill finance program. We buy some of their loans sort of behind the scenes. So we have multiple different caps that we wear. This is a program, a single-family loan program, where our role is just to provide a loan loss reserve, and it's really driven by contractors and community banks and credit unions. So this is one example of how we've tried to fill a gap in the market and take some of and sort of de-risk some of the investment for small banks. Next slide, please. On the multifamily side, we actually have developed a suite of programs, and I think when I look at this list of programs, everything from a power purchase agreement to CPACE, long-term financing attached to the property or secured against the property, an unsecured loan that we call the Lime loan, and a pre-development loan for folks who are trying to develop a really efficient building but might need extra support, even a specific health and safety offering. So these are all loans that we really have developed in response to where we think there are market gaps. So we have the Green Bank kind of has a role leading in certain areas and supporting in others, and none of these are projects, with the exception of maybe CPACE and a power purchase agreement. These are not projects that they're incredibly important to some of our small and hard to reach affordable multifamily housing owners, but they're also not they're not the kind of loans that we're going to be doing dozens and dozens and dozens of, but they're incredibly important. So I think when you think about serving everybody in hard to reach markets, one of the questions that I often have to ask myself is, is this necessary? And if it is necessary for the market and for the people you're trying to serve, does it have to be scalable? Because I think that those two things are not always don't always overlap. One of the things that we are excited about coming soon in our program areas is a new battery storage program with a focus on lower income communities. There's a new solar tariff program coming down that will allow us to create some new products, including a roof lease, which makes it much easier to sort of create value for property owners. And in fact, I should also say that the Green Bank recently, our mandate was expanded by the state to include environmental infrastructure lending. So we'll also be moving into things like water and wastewater, climate adaptation, even things like carbon markets or ecosystem services. So there's a lot of roles we could play. And I think just in this sector, in the multifamily sector, you can see that there's a large diversity of programs. So can you go to the next slide, please? So when I'm out talking to property owners and contractors and developers every day, I'm kind of thinking about what their motivation is. And on the multifamily side, there could be a lot of different motivations. Some people are very mission driven, thinking about reducing carbon footprint. For most folks, it's reducing net operating income. For a lot of people, it's, they're not, for various reasons, they're not able to get capital somewhere else. So they're coming to us and saying, hey, we really need to replace an aging boiler, or we really want to go solar. And there aren't a lot of, it's not covered by other programs. So we have a lot of people coming to us for various reasons. Please go to the next slide. And on a project by project basis, there's a ton of barriers, to some extent, the programs are set up to to address, but also, you know, the way we work with folks, the way we partner with the utilities and with our contracting partners, with other lenders, all makes a big difference. You know, for a lot of our affordable housing owners, you know, if they have a mortgage with our with HUD, our federal affordable housing lender, most of those projects are going to be difficult for us to work with. They may not allow a second mortgage, or they might be getting an interest rate from HUD that's so low that even a green bank, they don't really need our help. They also might be receiving a lot of conflicting messages from the market. You know, contractors are selling them things. They're getting marketing from the utility companies, and in fact, they're getting sold. Affordable housing owners are getting sold a lot of things, not just energy, security systems and roofing replacement. So there's a lot to think about when you're approaching a property owner. Please go to the next slide. So one of the things that I have sort of thought about is how to, when we use the term one-stop shop, it seems very straightforward, and we often have charts that show, okay, you're going to apply for a loan and you're going to close a loan and you're going to build it. But in fact, it's often much more of a curvy line. And I think that the pieces are still there, but I think from my perspective, the important thing is that we try to keep the process simple. I think that there's a lot of research, both kind of academic research and more like kind of white papers and things from industry groups about how information fatigue is real. So if you hand somebody 10 different options in a 40-page engineering report, there's only so much that they're going to be able to absorb. Solving problems for people is also very useful. It can help build trust, and if you so I often wonder, are the things that I can do for someone that makes it easier for them to see me as someone who can help them? Like, can I find them a good contractor? Can I make a connection and facilitate a conversation with their first mortgage holder to talk about how it would work to finance a project with us on the energy side? And as well, so creating those useful sort of touch points and helping to build rapport with them. And I go to the next slide, please. So I'm going to stop there because I know we don't have a lot of time, and I'm happy to have more of a conversation with folks.
Thank you very much. Sorry, my computer was not responding. So thank you, everyone, for your very rich presentations. We don't have a lot of time left, but I think it would be useful for those who have questions now or later on to send them to us so that we can address them and send them with the slides. In the meantime, I do have a question about the different business models. Do you think the models that we've seen and that you presented today are enough to achieve and to reach out to the large number of households that we've seen across the presentations that for different reasons are not participating in many of these projects? So maybe, Peter, since I see you on camera, if you wanna respond first, also based on your experience at the Connecticut Bank and your knowledge of the market in Connecticut and the US.
Do I think that the business models are enough to reach clean energy goals that are tied to carbon? Probably not. No. I mean, I think from my perspective, the real issue, the sort of political issue in the US right now is whether we will have a clean energy standard. So otherwise, we're just going to have this patchwork of state by state, everybody's doing what they can. Some states are more aggressive than others for different reasons, but I don't know that that patchwork is going to get us where we need to get in terms of emissions reductions.
Holmes, there's a question for you in the chat, and I think it relates to this as well. And if you want to put your camera on and answer that would be great. The question it's about what are the changes that will be needed to enable and make the utilities take up the program they just presented. And I would add to that, do you also agree with Peter about what is needed in terms of legislation? So there's a big debate in Europe about introducing new regulation and new legislation to trigger the renovation market.
Really, a couple of quick things. One is that in the United States, at least, even in areas that have been deregulated, there is still just one piece of copper going to each building. But there's no place in the United States where we have competing grid providers with 2 lines and 2 meters going to every house as if it's a fast food restaurant. So for that reason, all of the financial security for the utility site-specific investment is secured by the same security for the entire utility industry, and that is disconnection for non-payment, an important security that is subject to the oversight of the economic regulators for tariffs for the owners of that distribution grid. So the one simple policy adjustment that needs to be made is an appeal to the economic regulators of the entities that own the wires that go to that meter. They have the security, the financial security to make site-specific investments and to discuss with them their existing authority to approve a tariff or tariff rider for site-specific investment. This document is not mythical. It's freely available online. There are places where you can find a model, and one of them is actually in the appendix of the last visual aid that I used, the top internet search result for accessible financing. So if you search for that term and you go to the appendix, you will find a sample copy of a model tariff that any utility regulator could approve for its utility to use to make those investments. There is additional information about how program operators will implement such a policy in order to make sure that the highest consumer protections are in place. And our team at Clean Energy Works provides technical assistance to the utilities and program operators to make sure that the implementation of the policy reflects that interest in consumer protection. I hope that's a useful response for anyone who is with us today that's thinking, well, how would I get started? And who would I go talk to next? And what would I be asking of them to do? In some places in the United States, we have found that the utilities have captured their regulators in a way that makes them uncooperative. And in those places, the communities that are most concerned about an inadequate level of climate action have gone directly to their elected officials to pass a law that makes the utility regulators do their job.
Thank you very much. I think it's an interesting and hopeful, action-oriented, I would say, closing to this webinar. Our time has run out, so I want to really thank you again for your participation and thank all our speakers and the audience on behalf of BPIE, MIT, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Planning, the U.S. Department of Energy, the European Commission, who are sponsoring and cooperating on this exchange. A reminder that our EU-US series will continue next month with another webinar on creating jobs and other benefits of building renovation. And the date is the 2nd of December. We hope to see you all there. We will send the presentations and to all the participants tomorrow. Thank you again also on my behalf. And if you have any comment or question that you would like us to address, don't hesitate to reach out to us. Thank you very much. Have a good evening if you're in Europe and a good rest of the day if you are in North America. Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Mariano.
Thank you so much.
Bye. Thank you.
So all.